Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making a children's artwork frame. Well, children love to draw pictures. They love to create their art. They love to color. And it is inevitable, I think, whether you are an uncle, an aunt, a father, a mother, a grandmother, a grandfather, whatever you are, big brother, big sister, anyone that is in any kind of contact with young children, inevitably your fridge gets covered in tons of gorgeous artwork. And it's not a complaint, it's a great thing. Why not encourage the child's artistic ventures? However, I was thinking that it could be displayed a little nicer. And what we're going to do today is we're going to make a frame that is easy to use and that you can display and store, that's the important part, store your children's artwork. It all starts off with a little bit of 1/4 inch thick hardboard. Well, the average size that a child would work on as far as a piece of paper would be an 8.5 by 11. And that's where we're going to start our measurements with today. So I have cut one piece of 1/4 inch thick hardboard that is 1/8 of an inch larger than that. So we have 8 5/8 by 11 1/8. And then I have this piece, which will be our backboard piece, 1/4 inch thick. And what I've done is I have cut this to be a measurement of 11 3/4 by 9 1/4. And this will be our backboard. So we need to have these put together, kind of like this, centered. So this is what I'm going to do. I have from a variety pack, I bought a variety pack of springs. I keep them in the shop for projects, but I've chosen 4 springs out of this variety pack that I'm going to utilize for these projects. I have measured their diameter and they're just smaller than 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to make some layout lines here so that these springs can be mounted on our board. And let me show you what we're going to do. On our smaller board, I'm going to place a mark 2 inches in from each edge all the way around and draw a line. And where these lines intersect will be our holes. Now our larger backer board is 5/8 of an inch wider and 5/8 of an inch longer. And we need our holes to line up. So the difference is 5/8 between the boards. If we divide that by 2, we get 5/16. And that is the amount that we need to add to each one of these lines on the new board in order to center them as we have on the smaller board. So that will mean that we need a line coming in from each edge at 2 5/16. Now for each of these I have measured and verified that they are centered and that they are the same dimensions so that these intersecting points will line up when the boards are placed on top of each other centered. So what we're going to do is at each one of these intersecting points now, we're going to drill a stopped 3/8 of an inch hole. We will use a Forstner bit in order to do that, and we'll probably drill it to be 1/8 of an inch deep. And at this point, we want to mix up some 2-part epoxy, some 5-minute epoxy. We will place generous amounts in each one of the 3/8 diameter holes on our smaller hardboard, and we will glue in each one of our 4 springs into those holes. Once that is dry, we can then mix up some more epoxy. We will fill the holes of the larger hardboard and flip the smaller one over, making sure that all of the springs seat properly in the holes of the larger boards, and let it completely cure. Well, once your springs are dry, you need to take a measurement, and that measurement is the final thickness of the entire assembly here with no pressure on the springs, just as is. And mine is 1 5/8 of an inch thick. So we need to subtract 1/8 of an inch from that, and that will give us 1.5 inches. And that is how deep or how wide our frame slats are going to be. So I have some strips of cherry here. I'm going to rip them to be 1.5 inches wide. And at this point now, we will cut a 1/4 inch wide, 1/4 inch deep rabbet on one corner of each one of our pieces of 1.5 inch wide, in this case, cherry. Now the purpose of that rabbet that we just cut is to house our backboard, which is the larger of the two pieces of hardboard. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to cut a frame using this 3/4 inch thick cherry, and we will cut it so that our backboard fits perfectly inside of this 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch rabbet. And with a dry fit of our frame, which we just cut with the miter fence over at the table saw, we can see that our backboard fits in there just nicely. It's a little bit sloppy side to side by about, I'd say maybe a 1/16 of an inch, and the same top to bottom. I'm okay with that. You don't need it super, super tight, but it has to be a good fit. So at this point now, what you want to do is we're going to sand all of the inside surfaces of this, and then we're going to glue the frame together. However, this is normally not done on a frame, and I normally don't do it. But for this frame, it has to be done. And what we're going to do when we glue the frame together, we are actually going to glue in our backer board. That backer board will become a permanent part of the frame, and it will sit just like that. So we can get this all glued up, let it completely cure, and while we're waiting, we can actually start moving on to the next step. While we're waiting for this box frame, I guess we'll call it, to dry, we can work on the face frame. And what I've chosen is some 1/2 inch thick walnut for that. Now, this is just a simple, straight up frame. The exterior dimensions will be exactly the same as what our cherry frame is going to be. The only thing that you need to be sure of is that the inner dimensions of that frame is going to be smaller than 8.5 by 11 because it is meant to frame the artwork. And if it is too large, it will not hold the artwork in place. So for me, I've cut my pieces to be 1 1/8 inches thick, and I'm just going to 45 up a frame and we can glue it together. All right, and at this point you just want to do a dry fit to make sure that the outside edges line up with your original frame. It might be a little tricky because this center springy part here actually protrudes beyond your original frame, so it's trying to push up on this lid, but that's what we want. So this looks actually pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the fit of this. It might need a little tiny bit of tweaking, but for now I think I'm pretty pleased with it. Well, we're going to glue this face frame together, put it aside, and let it completely cure. I've given our main frame a good sanding all over, and that piece is pretty much done. This frame here, our face frame, I really want to strengthen these corners as there's going to be pressure on this from the inside with the paper and the drawings. So I've cut some slots for splines here. You guys have seen me do this a million times on the show, and I'm going to glue in these contrasting maple splines. We're going to let it completely set up, cut them flush, and sand this whole face frame all over to make it nice and smooth. Well, with our face frame done and sanded up, it's now time to mount it to our main frame. And what I've done is in the edge of the frame here, I have cut a rabbet, and I have done the same thing on the actual box side of the frame. And what I'm going to do is I have this old piano hinge here. I'm going to place this on the edge of our frame. We're going to screw it in place using some number 6 by 3/4 screws in the box and some number 6 by probably 3/8 screws in the face frame itself. And at that point, our lid will be hinged. So I'll get this mounted and I'll show you what we've got at that point. Well, the last piece of this project will be this closure, which is a large ball clasp. I'll try to put a link to it below if you guys are interested in it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up how I want it. I have the lid clamp closed to keep everything in place and make sure it lines up the way I want it. I'm going to screw this into place, and then that pretty much is the end of the project. And I'll come back and I'll show you how you use this. Well, I know I said the clasp would finish it off, but what I forgot about was the sawtooth hanger at the back. And this is your finished frame. It hangs on the sawtooth hanger, and basically I have a bunch of colored artwork here from my granddaughter. Obviously at 2.5 years old, she is more concerned with the colors and the enjoyment of coloring than she is about staying in the lines. And I'm okay with that. So all you need to do is choose the one that you want. Let's say this one here. And once you get it within the frame, you can close the frame and then lock it in place. And now you have your child's artwork displayed here in a beautiful walnut frame. And then they color another one for you, and of course you can just lay that on top of this one just like that and lock it in place. And again, it's beautifully framed, and that spring, or those springs that are there, that keeps everything really held in there nicely. And you can just keep adding it. I mean, you wouldn't want to put 50 sheets of paper in there, but the more that you can put in and, you know, straighten them out, lay them there on your spring-loaded base, close your frame, lock it in place, and there again you have their latest creation ready for display. And honestly, to have the child's artwork displayed like this in a really nice form, it does nothing but make the child feel good. It makes them proud of their work. And honestly, what a great way to boost the child's confidence and display your wonderful piece of artwork from your child. And there you have it, a children's artwork frame. Guys, this is a wonderful project for those of you whose fridge is plastered with all kinds of drawings from whatever this week's imagination brought your child. It's a wonderful project to both store those pieces and keep them nice and flat and protected, but it's also a great way to display them, and as I said earlier, to really boost your child's confidence as they see their wonderful artwork displayed on the wall in such a wonderful fashion. Now, here's the thing with the face frame. There is no glass in this face frame, and it's just wide open. The reason for that is with those springs, while there may not be the risk of it, or the risk may be small, I would hate for that back pressure on the glass to end up cracking it, breaking it, shattering it, and then it falls on the floor, the child comes along, you know the scenario. So I didn't put any glass in this, and I never intended there to be glass in this frame. If you are going to put glass in it, you very well can if you want, but I would suggest putting something like acrylic, like a plastic sheet, whether it be something like plexiglass, a thin sheet, or whatever it is, but something that will not break. And if that's the case and that's what you're going to do, you may also want to consider cutting a small rabbet around the inside edges on the inside of that frame to recess that plexi in place. Mine doesn't have any because I didn't want any, and that's just fine with me. Now this frame here, I'm going to take all the hardware off and I'm going to give it a couple coats of satin varnish, and that will really finish it off and give it that soft, clean finish and that clean look. It'll darken up that cherry, darken up the walnut, and make the contrast on those maple splines really stand out. So I'm looking forward to seeing that finished. But you really want to add a finish to keep it protected and give it that extra look. Now I played around with a bunch of different hinges on this and none of them really worked the way that I wanted them to. It was too much finagling, it was too much fussing around, and eventually I looked on the wall and there was an old scrap of a chrome piano hinge, and it worked perfectly. Now I would prefer brass to match the closure, and I may switch that up. I may purchase a brass hinge and replace that chrome one to give it some continuity between the ball clasp and the hinge. But for now, I'm fine with it. But if you're going to make your own, you may want to think about that when you're purchasing your hardware. So speaking of hardware, that ball clasp, I don't even know if they're available, but if they are, I will be sure to put the link to that down below so that you guys can get your own if that's what you like. Because I love these ball clasps. It's my last one I had in the shop. They're really great for box closures. Well, you don't need it locking, but you want something a little different and easy to lock in place. So for this application, it works well. Either way, guys, this is a wonderful project. It was a fly by the seat of your pants build. It worked out much better than I ever thought it was going to, and I really love the way it turned out. Make sure you give this one a try if you've got young ones that are providing you with artwork. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. This has been a lot of fun. I say that every week, but you know what? I truly enjoy what I do. I really do. I love what I do out here. I love what I make. I love being able to take a natural product like wood and turn it into something that the average Joe wouldn't necessarily turn it into. But all of you guys out there, you've got the same skill sets that I've got, regardless of their levels of development. And this frame is not out of reach for you. And I hope that you're loving what you do as well. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. You click the bell and then you're not going to miss the notifications of future episodes of the show. I hope you've enjoyed today's content, guys. I hope you found it fun and informative. I hope you're going to try it for yourself. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.